The Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Hello, and welcome back to our snack size edition of the Empathy Expansion Kit. Today, we are focusing on empathy and design. I'm Sakach here with Tullio Siragusa.
Hi, everybody.
Tullio, bringing empathy to complexity is really key here with empathy and design. Let's dive into it. So why not just design something the way I think it should be designed and just throw it out there?
Well, that's kind of the way it used to be, and many companies still do it that way. It's what I call the visceral gut feeling, right? I've been in this industry, in this space, my whole career. I know it in and out. I've been talking to clients and customers. I know exactly what they want, and here's what we should do. It's the build it and they will come mindset. And there's some success to that based on that because it is informed on some level, on a personal level, but it's a representation of one. So you're kind of hoping that every single one of your customers thinks the way you do. So if you want to take a more scientific approach, one that not only has some methodology to validate whether you have the right approach, but one that's deeply rooted in empathy, then you improve your chances of expanding the scope of your product or services beyond that one individual who's trying to create something that is good for them. And so there's 5 stages that I like that are part of design thinking, the traditional design thinking, but I've expanded them to 7, and I'm not the only one. A lot of people have done the same thing. And the first stage of that is really like to be curious. First, be curious with what is it that you're solving. Fall in love with the problem. We rush to fall in love with the solution, but the mindset needs to be more fall in love with the problem. What is the problem you're trying to solve? Love the problem, right? And then through that, you can take different steps, which is to understand how that problem impacts individuals and organizations and even society at large. So to do that, you have to go and speak to people, and you have to do research and get input and listen, be curious and listen to learn about what people are saying and dig into more than just the transactional layer, right? Understand the emotional ramification behind someone trying to fulfill a need. It's as simple as I need a doctor, right? Because I need to take care of something that I have an illness and I need a doctor. It's a transaction. I need a doctor, I have an illness, right? Or I need someone who's going to make me feel better, who's going to help me feel better. I need to feel better. So understanding those two, if you're building a service or an offering, is critical because one is transactional. I can help you find a doctor to fulfill a problem, or I can sympathize and empathize with you about what the problem is. What you really want is to feel healthy, to be happy, to not have to worry, to not have anxiety. And then how I position that product, which is still the same product and offering, makes a huge difference because I am positioning in a way that treats not only the problem, but also fulfills your need to feel better, to not have anxiety. So understanding, empathizing through that process, then defining how you're going to solve that problem, which is really about what's the transactional need, but also what is the intrinsic emotional need that you're fulfilling. Going through a process of ideating on, how to solve that. So you come up with some different ways and ideas of how we can approach this. And then you prototype those ideas. In some cases, it's literally a physical prototype that you go and validate, possibly with the same people that gave you the feedback to begin with, or it could be an approach over an offering if it's a service-oriented business. And again, you're prototyping, testing out how people would respond in a real way. And that test is not rushed. You want to really sort of like get more feedback too. So you go back with something, you test it, it validates the input you got. But then, when the rubber meets the road, people change their thoughts too. It's like, I thought I wanted it that way. It's like when you're building a house and you see all the pictures, and then the architect and the contractor starts building it. And then in real life, once you see the walls up and things, you're like, yeah, I think I want that wall over here, right? So you start changing things because when the reality is in front of you, your perception's different. So you start to change it. So in the process of testing these prototypes is when you get the real feedback of, I thought I wanted it that way, but this is actually what feels right to me. So you got to listen to those. And then it's about implementing and launching something that's a scale. And that's a iterative process. You don't just do that once. It's a continuous process. And that's the key thing. And all that's tied into empathy, because you really just care enough that you want to provide a valuable service and a valuable experience.
Let me recap that process again. So we got kind of studying how people interact with things. And then you got the generate the problem solving ideas. And sometimes you really have to get down to the real root of the problem. Sometimes it's not what you think it is. It's maybe deeper, right? So you kind of dig in deep there. Then you got to make the prototype of whatever, you're working on. And then you bring it back to testing. And then you kind of start this process over again, right? That's kind of the 4 steps we're talking about here.
Yeah, it's a loop. It's a loop. And you got to also spend time in how you're going to go about engaging with customers or users. And this is the dangerous part. And I use the word dangerous loosely. Most of the time we go in to validate an idea we have. And we can skew things to support the idea. It's very easy to do that. With the kind of questions you ask, you can actually shadow lead someone to give you the input to validate what you're doing. And you'll either get a validation yes or no, or, maybe, right? But you're limiting that because you are actually leading what you think that they need. So there's no empathy built into that. Whereas the empathy comes into going in as an empty vessel and saying, we have this idea, but we really don't know. That's where the curiosity comes in. What is it? We think this is the problem. How does that resonate for you? So designing how you approach the end users, how you go interview, and how you go do the research plays a big role in either validating something, which has no empathy in it because you've already made a decision, or actually informing what you're going to do and how you finalize what you're going to do based on real input. So that's a big part. And most companies want to rush to get a product out, skip that part, and then they learn along the way. So whether you do it up front or later, you're going to do it, right? You might do it through trial and error, and it'll cost you a pretty penny. Possibly in some cases, if you're a startup, it might cost you the ability to actually succeed. Or you can do it up front and now waste a whole lot of cycles with trial and errors and invest a little more time up front, but you actually get an adoptable solution up front.
Yeah, and so going back to that kind of the original question, me as a designer, just one person, that's kind of the problem, is that I'm just one person and people are complex, right? People are different perspectives. People are unpredictable. And the way I see something's not the same way, my daughter's going to see something, or my mother's going to see something or interact with it. And so you've got even, different age groups, different genders, different cultural backgrounds, all these different things come into play in this mix here. And so I'm just one person with one specific lens. And, when I get we do this at work, I have my 83-year-old mother say, hey, come use this product and tell me, and just, watch where she gets confused or lost in the process or something. And I'm like, okay, perfect. Thank you. So, that's really the key there. It's just getting all these perspectives in there.
Exactly. One person is not a statistical sample of a user group. And even, you have to have a broad enough sample. And this is also where diversity and inclusion plays a role too. We often talk about that in the employment side of things, but this plays a big role in also how you design and shape products and services, where you're getting different thoughts and different input. If you want to have something that's more adaptable, those are key components. So the setup is key, and being humble enough to say, I don't know, but I do want to solve the problem. I'm in love with solving this problem. This is what I think the problem is, but I want to understand it at a deeper level because I really, really want people to benefit from this. So it's this desire, this curiosity that drives the proper design in any product or service. And only a few people have that. There's some who have masterfully done it, right? And then they build community around their service offerings, not customers. This is, I think, what Steve Jobs was masterful at. He created community around the Apple product. You know, even when it wasn't up to snuff, when it first came out, it wasn't even as good as the PC. But he created a community of the creative types, the genius, you know, all the crazies, all the different commercials they did, all sort of pulling on the lever of, I'm one of the cool kids. If I'm one of the cool kids, I'm going to get an Apple, right? Even though the product was not nearly as good as a PC, technologically speaking. But when you create that community, you end up, you know, creating a movement, and that requires design, and that doesn't happen by accident.
So if people want to dive deeper into this, there's a book we can recommend, The Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman. This explores psychology behind good and bad design, emphasizes things, you know, like there's a process, sort of how it looks, expectations of how it should work, and then reflecting on that, kind of the personal meanings we attach to it. It'll really dive in there deep. There are also some classes you can look on Coursera. You can look on MIT offers a certificate on design thinking. So look around if you really want to dive deep on it. That's it for today's Empathy Expansion Kit episode. Join us tomorrow for Thursday's guest conversation, and we'll see you on the next Bliss Business podcast.